If you've ever wondered why the God of the Bible and other gods of the ancient Near East are so against this succulent, juicy piece of swine, well, stay tuned. We're going to be talking about the prohibition of pork in the ancient Near East and probably why it was prohibited in the Bible as well. You can find the biblical prohibition in Leviticus chapter 11, verse 7. It says, "The pig, for even though it has divided hooves and is cleft footed, it does not chew the cud, it is unclean for you." There's not a lot of great information and doesn't really tell you why the God of the Bible would be against this animal being eaten or, in fact, why it was unclean. But we have a lot of data from the ancient world to suggest that what's happening here in the Bible with the clean and the unclean animals was pretty common. The Egyptian texts talk about clean and unclean animals, and it includes why the pig is unclean, and even Hittite texts. And we also have Akkadian texts talking about animals that are clean and unclean. And we get a little bit of reasoning why some of these animals would have been prohibited and to what extent they were prohibited. Now, as for explanations, not a lot of people in the ancient world knew the full explanation for why the swine was unclean or unholy or impure. Some cultures had an idea and some didn't. Like the Egyptians wrote mythological texts to describe why the swine was forbidden. Whereas in Akkadian, when we find during the reign of King Sargon II, he actually explains, or somebody from his court explains, why they consider the pig to be unclean. It says, "The pig is unholy, bespattering his backside, making the streets smell, polluting houses. The pig is not fit for a temple, lacks sense, and is not allowed to tread on pavements, an abomination to all the gods, an abhorrence to his god, accursed by Shamash." And that's the sun god Shamash. So the explanation from the ancient Near East so far from Mesopotamia is that it's just not clean. It's a dirty animal. It's a disgusting animal, and it's an abomination. It shouldn't be anywhere near our temples or our priests. But we have other explanations, for example, from the Egyptian literature that provide a very different idea of why the swine is forbidden. Now, the mythological origin story for the banning of pork, which we get from the Egyptians, actually comes in the form of a dialogue between Ra and Horus. And there's two versions of it. The first is in what's called the coffin text. The second shows up in the Book of the Dead. We're going to read from the coffin text. The first paragraph starts out telling about kind of the origin of the onyx stone, and then it talks about the origin of pigs being banned, essentially. It says, "Ra then said, 'Look at that black pig.' Then Horus looked at that black pig. Then Horus cried out over the condition of his throbbing, raging eye, saying, 'Behold, my eye feels as at that first wound which Seth inflicted against my eye.' Then Horus lost consciousness, swallowed his heart before him. Then Ra said, 'Place him on his bed until he is well.' It was the case that Seth made transformations against him as that black pig. Then he cast a wound into his eye. Ra then said, 'Abominate the pig for Horus. Would that he be well.'" So that's the origin story. There's a bad deity that was turned into a pig or put himself into the form of a pig. And when Horus cast his gaze upon the pig, it literally damaged his eyes and caused him to black out. And that's why it says at the end, "So said the gods." That is how the abomination of the pig came to be for Horus by the gods and their followers. So the Egyptians that had probably a very ancient practice of not eating pigs probably at some point lost their idea of where this practice came from. And so they had to invent a mythological background for it. Whereas it seems like some of the other cultures probably just attributed it to being very unclean, which is why they wanted to keep pigs and other animals like pigs far away from the things that needed to be clean and holy. And we'll read one more text from the Hittite literature. The Hittites, like the biblical Hebrews, had a very elaborate system of clean and unclean and making sure that the temple was meticulously cared for so that the gods wouldn't become displeased with the people, because the Hittites had a big issue with the bubonic plague and they always attribute it to the gods being mad, right? So what do? You make sure you always appease the gods. So they had a very elaborate system of clean and unclean and how to treat everything. And here's what it says about preparing the temple on the day that you're going to prepare the temple. And this is just a small section of the text. It says, "You who are kitchen attendants of all the gods, cupbearers, tablemen, cooks, bakers, or vintners, be very respectful regarding the will of the gods for you. Maintain great respect for the sacrificial loaves and libation vessels of the gods. The place for making bread must be swept and sprinkled by you. Neither pig nor dog is ever to cross the threshold. You yourselves are to be bathed, wear clean clothes. In addition, your hair and your fingernails are to be trimmed. Let the will of the gods not find fault with you. If a pig or a dog does somehow force its way into the utensils of wood or clay that you have, the kitchen worker doesn't throw it out, but gives it to the gods to eat from the unclean vessel, that one will the gods give excrement and urine to eat and drink. And there's other prohibitions in some of these laws of the Hittites that if somebody does do something to be careless and contaminate the holy temple where the gods are going to be worshipped, they could actually be killed, not just given excrement and urine to eat. So that's how serious these people were, that the space of God needed to be holy, it needed to be consecrated, it needed to be not like your ordinary space. One of the reasons why there was a separation between God and men was because men were down here in the dirty earth, doing the dirty work, and the gods were supposed to be in the place where things were perfect and pristine and clean. And that's why even if you get demons in your house, there are ancient rituals for cleaning your house, because having a dirty house could allow the demons to come into your house. So cleanliness is the most important thing for any of the sacred spaces. And that's why pork was banned, because pork was just considered a very unclean animal.